Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today, we are doing chapter 96 of Breaking Step. Following Dawn in the pattern where the rings were quickly following the pattern where the rings were, quickly took them to the second floor. And because of how far apart they now were, they would have passed this door if not for Tibs staying close to the wall in preparation for whenever the gong would sound the next exodus and sensed the weave in it. He paused in surprise, then looked at the door. It was like the others. Even the lock looked as simple, but the weave flowed around and through it. Tibbs, what is it? Jekyll asked. He did the numbers as he looked back to the room with the rings, counting where the next one should be, 1 and 7 further, which meant this is the boss room. How? The them snapped. They can count, Kenny said, sounding annoyed and slightly mirthful too. And this row can sense the door isn't like the others, Stowe added in a suspiciously neutral tone. Had he done this to ensure Tibbs would notice it? How could you overlook something so simple? The them demanded. Oh, like you realized it was a mistake, Stowe replied, annoyed. And will unlocking this door just let them in to fight your creation? No, Stowe said, and Tibbs heard the smile. He can tell there's something there, but not what it does. Stowe was right. There was another weave behind the door, but he had no idea what it did yet. First, he needed to get through this lock. The weave there had strands going through and around the tumblers. He considered using water, as he'd done with the other locks, but was the weave there to interact with that? There was earth, metal, air, some water, and plenty of other elements he couldn't sense. So maybe Gani had built it specifically to force rogues who'd grown too dependent on their essence to go to force rogues who'd gone through dependent. Okay, dependent on their essence to go back to basics. Lockpicks? Jekyll asked as Tibbs formed them in ice. With, no, with ice. I don't want to risk the weave in the lock and deactivating the puzzle if I use essence directly to open it. If we come back, I'll try with essence then. The them snorted. The weave moved as he adjusted the tumblers, but not in a way that told him what it did. Some of the threads were aligning, but others already had been before he started. With the last tumbler in place, he turned the tension bar and the attached strand pulled onto the rest of the weave, and his breath caught in his throat as he was yanked away hard. The door was no longer like the others. It was silver, looking more like metal than stone or wood, with rows of circles in it. 81 slot, Don said as Tibbs caught his breath. That's the puzzle. 9 rows of 9 circles made 8 and 1. Don fit one of the coins he collected in a hole. That's what the coins are for. He considered something, but that can't be just about filling each of them. That's too simple. Do we even have enough? Jekyll asked. Tibbs took those he had and made stacks of 9s. He had 3 and 4 coins left. He had 3 and 4 coins left. The others added theirs, bringing the total to 7 stack and 6. I'll get them, Jekyll said, rubbing his hand as he turned to the door on the other wall. It'll be faster if I get them, Tib said. You've had your fun, the fighter replied. Now it's my turn. He kicked in the door. What's your sense of the puzzle? Don asked, and Tibbs put the fighting out of his mind. There's essence in each hole and lines connecting all of them. You put a coin in and sense for a change. There's essence in the coins, but I can't tell if it's interacting with what's already there. If it's supposed to interact with what's already there. You're right. I don't think just putting them will be enough. Told you, Stowe said with pride. Jekyll had added 2 coins to the stack and moved on to the next door. We could speed this up by each taking a door, Mez said. We know what the golems and them do, so none of us would be in danger. It's not going to help us get through this puzzle any faster, Don replied. So Jekyll might as well break golems. He's entitled to it after standing while you shot all of them. Not here, Jekyll said as he exited the office and kicked in the door facing it. Mez sat and took a skin from his back. If you'll make tankards, Tibbs, we might as well relax until he's done then. Tibbs made them one each while continuing to study the puzzle. When Jekyll added the next 2 coins, he left the food from his pack behind, and Don forced Tibbs to sit and eat something. Tibbs had a coin left over when he placed the last one in the door. He pocketed it. It might be worth something, even without the usual marking. 8 and 1 coins in the same number of holes, and nothing. Well, not nothing. The weave in the door had reacted, and the door had glowed before fading back to normal, and nothing had changed. Taking out a coin, putting it back, produced the same result. I think, Don hesitated, this is to let us know the weave checks what we did, and it checks what we do. Checks what we do, and it isn't right. Then what do? Jekyll asked. We work out the specific of the puzzle, the sorcerer replied. What did the weave do when you took the coin out and put it back? It shifted, then went back to its previous state, I think. You think? The weave is complex. It isn't so dense the way some of the others are when Genu didn't want him to be able to use what he sensed. Did it mean the weave wasn't important to the puzzle, or sensing it was part of the puzzle? Oh, what do you sense? He asked Don. The sorcerer closed his eyes. I can tell there's a weave, but I don't have your precision. There are lots of threads, but that's about it. Tibbs looked at Comdar, who frowned. There are secrets within the door, many secrets. He paused, and his channels filled with essence, moving to the note of sight. Not this time, cleric, Genny said with glee. There are too many of them, and of so many types I cannot say what is of use. This is purposeful. I am afraid you will need to accomplish this without my assistance. Tibbs nodded. Genny had been too pleased with herself. I told you I made it too hard for them, Still said. Don took a coin from the door and turned it in his finger. You said there is essence in the coins. Does it lock with the door's weave? Tibbs rotated a coin in its hole. The essence turns with the coin. Don tapped a finger on the coin. We're missing something. The dungeon can't expect us to try all the permutation. We'd be at it all week. That isn't what I did, Stowe said. I know very well it isn't, the them replied, annoyed. I can sense what you did as well as you, although it would have been a way to ensure they stayed past the door closing. How many are there? Tibbs asked, wishing the them had slipped and given him a clue. Don chuckled. I don't know, but the number would be so big, I doubt it can be contained in all the books in the library. It'd take us more than a week to try that many of them, Jekyll said. This is a lock, so it's just about making the essence line up, right? You can sense that, Tibbs. Only if I can tell them apart, Tibbs replied. Jekyll might be onto something, Don said, and Tibs stared at the lack of surprise in the tone. See if you can turn it so that as many of them line up. The coin turned, and some of the strands in it lined up. He moved it to another position, and different threads could be made to line up. He tried 3 more spots before shaking his head. So we can't win this? Jekyll said. Should I try punching through it? The dungeon will. The dungeon wouldn't let that be a possibility, Don said. And he makes all the puzzles so we can work them out, Tibs added. If this looks like it can't be done, it means we missed something. I told you, Stowe said. I know how runners think. They only had one thing on their mind and missed the rest. Tibs kept staring at the door to keep from reacting. That had been for him. Stowe wanted him to get in the room. Normally he wouldn't help, which meant the reward would be more rings. What they had already would... They already had a lot. But it wasn't enough to help everyone. So I'd confirmed he'd missed something, and that it was because he'd only had one thing on his mind. What was on his mind? Helping the town, which meant getting the rings, which had caused him to basically ignore everything else in the offices. If not for making sure that them didn't realize Tibs was speeding through their offices to get those to get to those with the rings, he wouldn't have bothered taking anything else. What had he taken? He took the 2 pages that reminded him of promises, the cylinder, the sheath without the sword in it, and the extra coin. He wanted to put it away since he knew that was what it was for, but was that him being too focused on one thing? He made a table of ice and laid the item on it. What are these? Don tapped the papers. I don't know. It was in one of the safes. I want Darren to look at them because to me, the way the letters and decorations are arranged reminds me of how promises look. Stole many promises, have you? Don asked with a chuckle. Tibs realized that while he told him about taking down the brokerage for Archer and so they wouldn't be able to pay the assassins anymore, he'd forgotten to mention what he'd taken for himself in the process. The sorcerer took the cylinder and then studied it. What do you think this is? I noticed them on the desks. They were in the safes too. Darren might know what it is. Don nodded and placed it back. Why are you taking them out? Because we're missing something. Tibs looked at the items, sensed them. The answer was there. The answer to the puzzle is in this room. He motioned to everything around them. So I'm trying to figure out what item we found that has it. Jekyll placed 3 crystal balls on the table. Those come from the offices. But we know what they're for, Don said. Jekyll shrugged. And the dungeon knows what we know. We know that. I'm not that smart. I'm just adding them because Tibs said he's looking at all the items we found there. We found in there. And doesn't this look like some sort of quill? Maz asked, picking up the cylinder. Look at the tip. That's definitely something I could write with. But there's nothing to write with or on, Don said. There is that. Jekyll tapped the paper. And how does that have something to do with the door? The sorcerer asked. I think you're trying too hard. You're saying anything that comes to you and hoping it's right. What else are the rest of us going to do? The fighter replied with a smile. You two are the smart ones. I have so little idea. I just say them when I do. They'd looked at the cylinders and took the cylinders and looked it over. Mez was right. The tips was a lot like that of a quill. He sort of remembered thinking that when he picked up the first one. And he knew better than to dismiss what Jekyll said out of hand. He'd known he was smarter than he let on well before he promised Krosef to do better. And Don was wrong about one thing. Tibs was the one with a habit of trying too hard. If getting lost in how deep the problem was, of getting lost of getting lost in how deep the problem was, even when it had a simple solution. Not that this looked to have a simple solution. If this was a quill of some sort, where was the ink? And Tibbs agreed with Don that the paper was probably not what needed to be written on, which left them without ink or anything to write on. He picked up the coin, a thought coming to him. Can coins be blank? No, Don replied. Sure, before they're stamped. Those aren't coins, the sorcerer said. They're blanks, like these. He motioned to the door. They have to be stamped for to be called coins. Hence, coins can't be blank. You'd have fun convincing my cousins of that, Jekyll said, considering it was their job to get them before they reached the treasury. My father liked having his own supply of coins to stamp as needed. Wouldn't it be easier for your cousins to steal them after they've been stamped? Mez asked. The treasurer wouldn't know they've been taken, Don said. Each treasury has a code they use to mark the coins as authentic. I don't know what it is, since it's a secret they guard with more ardor than the coins themselves, but until they get distributed, they know exactly where each coin is. And that secrecy means no one knows what the code is for coins from other kingdoms, Jekyll added. Tibs turned the coins in his fingers. So they stamp a coin to make it real? More to show where it's from, Jekyll said. Some kingdoms refuse to recognize a rival's coin as valid, but more will say it's worth less. It's how kings show they aren't happy with the others. But since it didn't cost my father anything but buying the stamp from each country, even a reduced value means more coins for him to spend. So the stamp tells you where the coins come from, Tibbs used. Where it claims to be from, Jekyll said. But yeah, basically. Which didn't help him. He had no way to stamp the coins. But was that right? He was confident of that the fact the coins weren't real yet was part of it. But was he supposed to make them real or reveal the truth of them being real? He suffused himself with light and shone it on the door. Stowe chuckled as the light was absorbed by darkness in the door, making it grow thicker instead of piercing it. You aren't cutting through this one, buddy. With a huff, Tibbs let go of the element and turned to his friends, who were rubbing at their tearing eyes. How about some warning next time? Jekyll blinked a few times. Sorry, I thought I could have light show me the truth about the coins, but the dungeon's wise to that. The darkness in the weave absorbed it. Mayhaps, Commodore said, if light and darkness were to assault the weave, it would be defeated. Oh yes, Jekyll said eagerly. Said eagerly. Do it. I want to see what will happen. Tibs studied the weave, sensed it for a while in case the them could tell what he did when he did that, then shook his head. If I knew light-based etching, it might work, but all I can do is throw it at something. With that, it comes down to who has the largest reserve. I have a lot, but I figure a dungeon will have a lot more than me. He went back to what was on the table. He had a paper, which might be a promise, a cylinder, which might be a quill, a sheath pretending to be for a knife, a coin that wouldn't be one until it was stamped, and 3 bottles, one that healed, one that replenished essence, and one that replenished stamina. Only, was that all they were? He sensed the health potion, and it seemed like the others he'd sensed before. Does anyone have a healing potion from a previous run? He hadn't taken any, since with his reserve and access to purity, he didn't need them. Mez placed a stamina potion on the table. I didn't bother bringing the healing one since you're here. He took it and the crystal bottle containing its equivalent. They registered mostly as the same, but the difference were so small it wouldn't matter. He handed it back to the archer, only to hold on to it as he tried to take it. He was getting something wrong again. Everything outside had differences. Carrie and I had explained about chaos and how a change far away could affect something next to Tibs. That because of that, even master crafters couldn't replicate every detail of something they made. But Stowe wasn't a crafter, master, or otherwise. He was a dungeon. He didn't have to remake things each time he needed it. He had what he called models, and all he had to do was put essence in them, and he had the real thing. When it came to their essences, the same items had exactly the same essences, unless Stowe made it so they didn't. He's got something, Don said. That's my line, Jekyll complained. You need to be faster then. Tibbs removed the stopper and poured a drop out, catching it with water. If Stowe had added something, then what he needed to do was take it out of the rest of the essences. With the with the other portion to compare it with, he could identify those differences. But how did he go about taking them out? The first step was easy. Pull away the essences he had. That left him with Tibbs. Jekyll asked quietly, how long should we let you stare at the water before asking if you're doing anything? I'm trying to figure out how to pull the whatever it is out of the rest. I think that's the ink. I can tell it's there, but it's not made of my elements. I know how to force those. I don't have a way or toward me, but it's not gentle. And the sense I get of this is that it's fragile. What is your theory? Don asked. Your idea. Yeah, I did. We only have one thing that really needs to be written on. The coins in the door. We have something that might be a quill, and maybe the ink goes into the cylinder. So I'm trying to get that out of the rest of the essence into the potion, put it in there, and use that on the coins. I couldn't do that, Mess said. I know, that's why I'm trying to work out how. That isn't what he means, Don said. The dungeon doesn't make puzzles for you to best, Tibbs. It makes puzzles for any of us to crack if we apply ourselves to it. Whatever the solution is, Mez should be able to do it. And because I'm not as smart as either of you, the archer said, I'd just take the quill, he did, and dip it into the provided ink pot. He put it in the open stamina portion until the end touched the liquid, and the change was immediate. The yellow liquid turned gray as that extra essence moved into the quill. I really didn't think he'd be the one solving it, Kenny said. Runners are full of surprise, Stowe replied with a hint of pride. I think it worked, Ms. Jekyll said, and Tibbs was too annoyed at himself for having overcomplicated things to glare at the fighter. You're the one holding the quill, he told Maz when the archer offered it to Tibbs. I don't know what comes next. Tibbs smiled. What do you do after dipping your quill in the ink? I write. Tibbs motioned to the door. Then write. What if it doesn't do anything? Then we know this isn't the solution. But Kenny had told him it was. Maz stepped to the door, thought, then applied the quill to a coin and gasped. He applied the quill to a coin. He gasped and stepped away. I didn't do that. The queen now showed an anchor with a setting sun behind it. Mez put the quill in Tibbs's hand. I was just going to write a letter, but as soon as I touched it, that flowed out. You do the rest, so I don't break anything. You can't break it, Don said. Clearly, this is like a combination lock. The right item needs to be in the right position for the lock to disengage. The ink needed to be in the quill, and that unlocks the stamps. I'm going to stick to fire essence, Mez replied. Tibbs shrugged and touched another coin. Ink flowed out of the quill and shaped into the form of a bird he didn't recognize, but he'd seen coins with it before, same as with the anchor and sun. The next one had a flower, then a shield with 3 swords, then an anchor again. Don had to do the top rows, but but then they had 8 and 1 stamped coins. They all had multiples except for 1. Don looked at it. That's strange. I thought I knew all the kingdom stamps. I know it, Tip said, caressing the coin with a mountain on it and a crack near its base. It's our coin. He could even make out the path leading to the dungeon's entrance. The dungeon stamp, Jekyll whispered. I knew you'd work that out, Stowe said. If that's us, Miss said, a smile forming as he looked over the door. I know what the solution is. And that concludes chapter 96 of Breaking Step. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell if you want to read the story. It is up for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of that, that is on my Patreon, where we're about 20 chapters. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.